How to get the right rent for your property every single time. Today you're going to learn all about the right rent system, which is a process we came up with at Opes Partners to set the right rent. And it's actually based on the same process that a registered valuer would use to put a value on your property when they come and look at it. So here's how it works. You take your property and you go to Trade Me and you find similar properties that are being rented out in your area at about the same time. And what are you going to find? You're going to find some properties are nicer than yours. They can charge more rent. There are going to be properties that are similar to yours. You're going to charge about the same. And there are also going to be properties that, hey, just aren't as nice, and you're going to charge more rent than those ones. Now, you might say to me, well, Ed, this is quite obvious. Why do we need a system for this? Well, the reason is you've got to put together what we call a structured table. This is the most important part. This is where you're going to take the address, the rent, the details, and also create an assessment. Let me give you an example. There's another property being rented at the moment, 123 Queen's Quay, and that's being advertised for $600 a week in rent. 2 bed, 2 bath, 2 car parks. And after looking at it, you say, you know what? If I was a tenant and the prices were the same, my property, that property, both $600 a rent, I'd take their one. Well, that property is then superior. It's better than yours. You can't charge that much rent. Let's say there's another one, King's Crescent, being advertised for $540 per week right now, and you say, you know what? That one's inferior to mine, not as nice. That means you can charge more rent than $540 per week. And let's say there's 2 other properties, one on Prince's Place, one on Saint Street, and those are similar to yours. Well, based on this, what you've got to do now is take the rent and compare it to your assessment. And what you'll see is there are better houses being rented for $600 per week. You can't charge that much, wouldn't be right. But similarly, there are worse houses being advertised for $540 per week, so you can charge more. Well, what's the right rent? Take $10 off the top, add $10 to the bottom. It's somewhere between $550 and $590 per week, and then you can make a judgment call about where you want to charge within that given range. Now, the structured table is really important because you're going to put this together in either a Microsoft Word document, maybe an Excel spreadsheet, and then you're going to take that right rent assessment and give it to your property manager. Now, what are they going to do with it? Well, they're going to use it as the basis for a conversation with your tenant about what the rent they want to charge is and the reasons why that is the case. Now, that means that it's not going to be an emotive discussion, it's going to be one based on facts and data, because after all, what does the legislation say? It says, hey, you can charge the market rent, not significantly more. That's what the right rent system's all about. Want to give you another example, this time looking at a real property, one that I own, that I have run the right rent system on. So you can see here, I've got my subject property, that's mine. I'm going to compare that to a similar property. So my property, 2 bed, 1 bath, 2 car parks, 69 square meters, based in central Christchurch. And I've got to figure out, well, what is the right rent for that property? Well, let's look at the similar one. 2 bed, 1 bath, 1 car park, 73 square meters, so slightly bigger, and that's being advertised for $500 per week. Now look, after looking at the location, looking at the photos, that property is actually better than mine. It's got a better location, it's newer, and if I tried to charge the same amount of rent, $500 per week, you know what? I think a tenant would go for the other one because mine's not as nice, so I can't charge that much. Let's look at another example. Now, it might look pretty similar from the outside, but this one was 2 bed, 2 bath, slightly better, but no car parks, 72 square meters, and that's being advertised for $450 per week right now. After I've done my assessment, this one is inferior. Sure, it does have the extra bathroom, but it's in a worse location and doesn't have a car park, which tenants tend to really value, specifically in central Christchurch. So I can charge slightly more than that. Now, I've put together 5 separate properties, and you can see what my assessment was for each of these. And ultimately, this is what's going to enable you to have that discussion with the tenant after you've looked at your assessment. So let's go through this. Take another example, one on Madras Street, $490 per week. I've said that one's superior. Similarly, there's one on Peterborough Street, $450 per week. That one's inferior. So in this assessment, $490 per week, it's too high, not right to charge that much. $450, too low, my property's worth more than that. So somewhere between $460 and $480 per week, that is the right rent. Now, a wee tip for you, after running the right rent system many times, you've got to save the photos from Trade Me. I'll tell you why. If you just copy and paste the link from TradeMe and put it in your right rent assessment in your document, as soon as that property comes off TradeMe, the link's invalid. You can't look at the photos, you can't see the details. So you need to save those off TradeMe so that you can then send it to your tenant and to your property manager, because you don't know when those listings are going to come off TradeMe. Secondly, you also want to think about when's the right time to do this. And I usually say 75 days before you want the new rent to kick in. And that's because you've got to take a week or two to put this all together and then send it to your property manager. And then you've got 60 days where you've got to, first of all, give notice to your tenant before the new rent starts to kick in. So usually 2.5 months before you want that new rent to kick in, that's the right time to use the right rent system. And look, one final criticism. There is a fair piece of criticism about this system, which is that anybody can list a property on TradeMe for whatever the rent they want. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what a tenant is going to pay. So just be aware that people may advertise a property on TradeMe for a certain price, doesn't necessarily mean that's what a tenant's going to pay. Now, what I want to know is, when are you next going to use the right rent system? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, why not hit that subscribe button and toggle that little bell so you get notified about all our future videos.